I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of March 22nd, 2023. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including staff reports, is available online or at the Planning Department, room 213. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking lot across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cell phones may not be used in the chamber during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. The Planning Commission action today is final on the following item, 1.5, Special Permit 23014. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held March 8th, 2023.
So moved, Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Abstain.
Bruce,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Shelley to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Shelley, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
I want to please note that Agenda Item 1.1, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 23001, is being removed from the consent agenda for a request for a 2-week deferral to the April 5th Planning Commission hearing. First item, 1.2A, Annexation 23004 to annex approximately 6.75 acres, more or less, on property generally located at South First Street and West Van Dorn Street, associated with item 1.2B, change of zone 05061F for the change of zone from AG Agricultural District to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District, PUD Planned Unit Development, and expansion of approximately 6.75 acres, more or less, to the Southwest Village PUD B2 Casino area for additional temporary parking on property generally located at South First Street and West Denton Road. Next item, 1.3, change of zone 23017 from RS Residential District to B3 Commercial District on property located at 701 North 27th Street. Item 1.4A, Special Permit 1304A to allow for the expansion and reconstruction of a non-conforming and non-standard use with associated waivers to reduce the front, side, and rear yard setbacks, increase the building height, and modify parking requirements on property generally located at 2032 U Street, associated with item 1.4B, Street and Alley Vacation 23001, vacating a portion of excess right-of-way along the south side of Vine Street between North Antelope Valley Parkway and North 22nd Street for the Clyde Malone Community Center adjacent to property generally located at 2032 U Street. And item 1.5, Special Permit 23014 to allow for a CUP community unit plan for 14 dwelling units and associated waivers on property generally located at North 26th Street and Old Dairy Road. The Planning Commission action is a final unless appealed to the Lincoln City Council. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No, I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting these sites to be disclosed?
No.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on these consent agenda items? If so, please stand and state that item.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak on any of the items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I would move to approve the consent agenda, Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Approved, 8-0.
I will now ask Shelley to call the requests for deferral.
We did receive, is recommending a 2-week deferral for item 1.1, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 23001, to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County 2050 Comprehensive Plan to add the major streets and right-of-way map with accompanying text to the April 5th, 2023 Planning Commission hearing.
I'll take a motion.
I would move to defer, but Shelley, a point of order. The written testimony we've gotten requested a 4-month delay. Is that correct?
Yep.
So it wouldn't
a
be
2-week delay.
not a 2-week.
Correct.
Okay.
Are we going to have for the 4-month, or we want deferred to 2 weeks?
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. Yes, we contacted Kent Seacrest, who requested a 4-month delay. We think, since we had just received it this week, we think it was best for us to get a chance to get back with him and talk with him. We're going to talk with staff, so we have a meeting already set up to do that. So we think we won't need a 4-month delay, but if in 2 weeks Kent disagrees and he still thinks he'd like more months, that is fine. We just think there's other projects that are relying on the map as well that we need to move it forward. But a 2-week delay is no problem.
So we are approving a 2-week delay.
That is our request, yes.
Okay.
And again, that wouldn't stop Kent from coming back in 2 weeks and saying, we're not quite ready yet,
Sure.
and he thinks it still should be more time.
Okay.
Understood.
Then I would move a 2-week delay.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Poor.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Approved, 8-0.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak today on Comprehensive Plan Amendment 23001? Okay. We will now proceed to public hearings. Prior to staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak, unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. You will have 1 minute then to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing, unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the hearing. Shelley, will you please call the first public hearing item?
Item 4.1A, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 23002 to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County 2050 Comprehensive Plan to revise the future land use map from urban residential to commercial and urban residential for Hobbies Echo Edition on property generally located at 1620 South 84th Street, and associated item 4.1B, change of zone 23013 from AG Agricultural District to R1 Residential District, PUD, Plan Unit Development for Hobbies Echo Edition to allow for up to 8,200 square feet of office use and a hotel with up to 5 rooms with associated waivers, also on property generally located at 1620 South 84th Street, and associated item 4.1C, annexation 23001, to annex approximately 4.70 acres, more or less, for Hobbies Echo Edition on property generally located at 1620 South 84th Street. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these applications?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
No. George?
Thank you, George Wesselhoff, Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. I will briefly review both the CPA as well as the combination annexation and change of zone reports, and then Bob Simmering with LTU will review access management policy as it pertains to this request. So starting with the comprehensive plan amendment, the location for this proposal is along 84th Street on the east side, generally north of Norval Road, In terms of other arterials, we're south of A Street, north of Van Dorn Street. The request is to amend the future land use designation from urban residential to commercial and urban residential. The proposed commercial would be for Lot 1 of the proposed planned unit development for Hoppy's Echo Addition, which comprises 1.94 acres. So this property is impacted by the pipeline planning area, which that runs along the west side of the property, and it affects approximately 1.44 acres of the total 7.04 acres of the PUD property. The PPA is approximately 166 feet from the western property line. The existing house, the large existing house, does not fall within the PPA. The pipeline planning areas reflect the presence of major pipelines that travel through the community. These are high-pressure pipelines which transport large quantities of hazardous materials that can have serious public health and safety impacts. And so the intent is to not have vulnerable populations, including residential structures, within the pipeline planning areas. That said, the existence of a pipeline planning area does not mean that the only way to develop the adjoining property is through commercial use. There's various examples, and the report listed several examples of developments that were residential, that were developed accommodating or working around the pipeline planning areas. And I will highlight one of those here. This is an aerial photo from 2016 timeframe. The location is Firethorn. We're generally north of Pioneers Boulevard on the east side of 84th Street, south of Van Dorn. There was an existing large house. It also had an existing driveway access, and there's a pipeline planning area that affects approximately 110 feet of the private property. That property was developed with residential. This is an aerial photo from today. The existing large house was not removed or demolished. It is still there. They removed the driveway access pursuant to access management policy, and to account for the pipeline planning area, they incorporated an outlot that included detention and open space, as well as a private street, South 85th Street, and they developed with residential, with tie-in to the residential neighborhood of Firethorn. And the zoning is residential, R1 for Firethorn. There's no commercial at this specific location. The proposed amendment to change the designation from urban to residential to commercial would violate the commercial use in the PUD in terms of access management policy, by keeping a commercial access driveway on South 84th Street. There was a deviation request that was submitted to LTU so that the development can keep the existing access location without any turn lane proposed. That deviation request was denied by the LTU director, and the applicant has appealed it to City Council. In this case, the commercial proposal cannot meet both the design strategies of the access and the comprehensive plan. And that pertains to the keeping the residential separate from the commercial in terms of use, not having the commercial use go through the residential areas. The access management policy is to not have a single commercial use with a single driveway, but to have a shared use that doesn't take access through residential neighborhoods. I will go on to the change of zone here for the PUD. So this is the area again that we're talking about on the east side of South 84th Street. The annexation includes part of the total part part of the total PUD area. The annexation includes 4.70 acres. The PUD area includes 7.04 acres. The proposed Lot 1 of the PUD will follow the zoning regulations for the O3 zoning district, while the outlot will follow the R1 zoning requirements. The proposal, and I'll have another graphic here showing the PUD. The specific proposal is to have an office and 5 hotel room use. The existing single-family home would be converted into a hotel, as they describe it, with the attached garage converted into an office. There's also a future office addition planned in the rear. So this is the existing house. This would be the future office addition. Given the small size, it may actually function as a short-term rental. It's not totally clear on that, but a short-term rental would be a permitted use today under the zoning, including agricultural zoning. There are waivers that were requested. 2 of them pertain to the subdivision ordinance for pedestrian way and block length, which are actually not necessary because the proposal would meet those requirements. Another request is a waiver from the design standards to allow detention and water quality to be provided with future development. LTU watershed does not support this waiver because of the size of the parcel, so the recommendation on that request is to deny. So in this case, the request for the planned unit development is not justified. Approval of the commercial use surrounded by residential uses on all sides is contrary to the comprehensive plan, since the only appropriate access for the future development of this property is through the existing residential streets. That is how development is typically established, with one subdivision providing access to the next. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Bob Simmering, who can highlight the access management policy.
Bob Simmering, LTU, 555 South 10th. And I think to kick this off, I might just talk about the origination of the access management policy a little bit, and hope that gives some understanding as to how it developed. The access management policy was not devised by a group of engineers sitting privately away from the public. This was a task force that was set up, and it brought in developers, engineers from outside of LTU, public officials, business people, regular citizens, schools, LFR, and it was brought up because there was so much chaos in the way access was being done in the city of Lincoln. So that group worked for many months to develop a policy that was agreed upon by the group and then brought to the city and adopted, I believe, in 2012. One of the things that's in the introduction of that policy is recognizing that there's a conflict between traffic flow and direct access. And that is what we're talking about here. This, as it goes into the second part of it, it's the policy of the City of Lincoln to promote maximum safe and efficient travel of persons on the public right-of-way and to preserve maximum capacity of the roadway to accommodate such travel. So safety is a major issue in access points. Crashes are devastating, and everything we can do to avoid creating a higher level of crash incident is important. This location has a couple issues with the access management policy. One is that access management on an arterial, and this is a major arterial street, is not allowed for just a single user. Generally, it's a street, it's an intersection to a private road, that type of thing. This one is for a single user. Along with that, because this is 84th Street is on the National Highway System, it does get a higher level of scrutiny. There was a study done, a traffic analysis done by the engineer for the developer that indicated there was not a there were not merits for a turn lane here. And that study is accurate for 2022 traffic. But just to point out, the modeling of this corridor shows traffic volumes in 2019 of 29,880, 2022, 31,920, 2035, 41,153, and 2050, 46,843. Some of the things that are impacting this are development to the south and east of this property. There will be a arterial street intersection at South Street that will head east, and that will cause a significant traffic impact on this area. If that traffic analysis was done using 2035 traffic, it would indicate a turn lane is required. The estimates we have in just projecting out these numbers, by the year 2026, that traffic analysis would probably show this requiring a turn lane. So based on that, LTU did recommend denial of this, and the director did follow through with that, and there is an appeal filed. There are other points of access that this property can have coming off of the street. I believe it's Stonehill Road, and George has it there. That is an access that abuts to this property and could be used for access to serve this facility. So I think that covers the points that I would like to throw into the mix.
Before we get into more substantive questions on the on what's before us, I have a kind of more of a procedural question triggered by your point of the request for the deviation request that has been denied and is now on appeal to the city council. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So wouldn't their decision on that action be relevant to what we decide in the things that are in front of us? I'm just thinking that knowing what the city council is going to decide about that deviation request certainly would be relevant as we decide what to do with regard to these three actions. And I'm concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse. So to me, that's a procedural question that I'd like answered before we get into the merits.
I'll take it. Tim C., Assistant City Attorney. I think the practical matter is that all of them will come before the City Council at the same time. So I guess I would say this board is, none of the items before the board on this item are final action today. I don't believe they're all
That's
recommendations to the City Council. So I think you can make comments. I think you can make your recommendations reflect your thoughts on that item. But I think that we could move forward today, and then all of them would likely come together at the City Council stage.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Okay. All right. Thank you. That was I wanted to get that out on the table before we got too far into the weeds, which seems possible. So, other questions? Any other questions at this point?
I have one, Tracy.
Go ahead, Rich.
You mentioned that this would be appropriate for short-term rental, and that's different than a 5-room hotel. Can you tell us what the differences are?
Sure. A short-term rental would be permitted today under the existing zoning. That's when, basically, it's still, the house is still there. They don't have to change the zoning. They don't have to add parking. They can rent out rooms. They have to get a license for building and safety, but it's not the same as a hotel, which has different requirements in terms of parking, a different use designation. And it's not permitted in this zoning in AG or residential.
George, say that again.
So a short-term rental, it's under, it's a conditional use under the household living, so it falls under the umbrella of residential use, whereas a hotel or motel is commercial use. So it's allowed in multiple districts, including residential, ag districts. They rent out individual rooms up to, I think it's a 30-day time frame. And that was an ordinance that was recently adopted in the last few years.
So they could just remain residential and not be changed to commercial?
Correct. The issue here would be the office use, but they could do a short-term rental even without changing the zoning, leave it as ag zoning today.
I did notice that there was one note in the staff report about an illegal subdivision, and that was without final plat approval. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So that pertains to the requirement that any division of land under 10 acres requires a final plat. I do have a graphic if I could show it, but basically well, these two parcels here that are shown on this current aerial were actually one prior to last year, and the applicant split them without going through a final plat process.
I see. Okay, thank you. Other questions at this point?
So from this standpoint, with how the layout is that's shown to us today, the road and access do not go back to Stony Hill Road, correct?
In terms of the commercial use, they do show a conceptual layout that shows the connections for the residential. Here's the PUD. So there's an outlot that's not the commercial. It would be for future residential that would provide those connections to Stony Hill Road and Norville Road, and then a future connection to the east. But it would not provide that connection for the commercial use.
Okay, and then, so on Stony Hill Road, we go back to A Street, correct?
Correct. A Street is to the north.
Is that I can't remember if that's a right out only? Go both ways?
I think you can go both ways.
You can go both ways, okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's all I had question-wise.
Anything else for George right now? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Testimony from the applicant.
My name's Fred Hoppy. I live at 1600 Stony Hill Road, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm the applicant, basically, my companies are. This is Ben Coons, one of my staff, and Rick Onan, our engineer, who can explain, to start with, what exactly we're doing and asking for, and then I'll tell you why.
Thank you. Again, Rick Onan with ENA Consulting, 701 O Street. So, again, what we're here today primarily is looking at a goal of repurposing the existing house for office use. And that existing house is this kind of tan shaded footprint. There's a proposal by the developer to add an office wing, it would be in yellow, and then parking for that in the gray. There was a mention about a legal subdivision. I guess the developer had kind of started the process to try and do this in a different manner when he was notified that there was a different process he needed to follow. So that's why we're here.
I can clear that up.
So you also recognize that this property is likely going to be is going to subdivide in the future into residential use to the east. Again, what we're primarily concerned with today is the office use on this parcel up front. So I guess one of the things that we asked for as part of this subdivision then is that the details of that residential use would be delayed until sometime in the future when more is known about how exactly that's going to be sewered. Sewer has to come from the east on that property. So you heard some talk about access. Again, the residence currently takes access at this point. And we're asking that we just be able to upgrade that to a commercial drive, making it wider. As Bob had mentioned, we had gone through some calculations based on today's traffic numbers, and the National Transportation Research Board standards do not dictate a turn lane at this time, so we were requesting waiver of that turn lane as well as part of the deviation request that was submitted to LTU. Related to that, there are a couple conditions on the conditions of approval that we would like to amend. Got a motion to amend, and that would include, first of all, condition 3.2 was requested that we submit a grading and drainage plan. To do what we want to do for this particular building is going to require less than 1 acre of land disturbance. So we're asking that we can just have that review done as part of the building permit for the office addition. And then the area would have a more consensus or concise look at drainage and detention when we do the future residential development. Also, in the motion to amend, we're asking that conditions 3.7 and 3.8 be struck contingent on action by the city council on the deviation request. I guess one other thing that was brought up in the staff report was talking about commercial use along this corridor. This is an exhibit that shows kind of the different land uses along that corridor. We're located right here. You can see there are small pockets of commercial kind of up and down the corridor currently. So from there, I'll turn it over to Fred.
Well, it's Fred again. And let's do a little background about this property and what we want to use it for. My family's been in business in Lincoln, Nebraska since 1903. We're looking for a headquarters office. I happen to live next door to this property. As a matter of fact, I own the property that's on the northeast and the straight east of this property. We acquired the property after my neighbor had it on the market for a long, long time. And I decided I would take him out of it because I didn't want it developed. I like my backyard just exactly the way it is, and so do all my neighbors. And so if we acquired the property, we could leave it the same. The proposal you have in front of you is specifically designed so that we can put our headquarters office for Hoppy Development Company on that site and leave the rest of it the way it is, which we'll be adding some landscaping, but other than that, we're not really doing much to the building or to the site. We're going to be leaving the west facade practically identical to what it is now. Do you want to show that?
They're going to get my computer hooked up.
Oh. Well, we've mocked up what our plan is to leave the house site as it sits. Add a building behind the garage of the house, which would be up to 8,200 square feet. I don't think it's quite that big, but.
Hey, Fred, if we could get you to switch over to this one, they'll work the laptop.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to talk from this microphone.
Oh, excuse
Sorry.
me. Sure. So the plan is, and the reason why we even want the deviation request is because we like the presentation of the road into the house. Essentially, it's a driveway, but we don't need a change. We don't have that many people that will be officing regularly in the building. Our company employs about, I suppose we're at 30 right now, but only 12 regularly are in the office. Some are in Grand Island, some are in Fremont, and all our construction guys, we have 3 divisions in our company. Construction, development, we develop affordable and workforce housing, and property management, which is the property management of the workforce and affordable housing we build. So those people are all out on site. Construction's out on site, but for 2 guys. The rest of us, really what office is there is the headquarters administration and the development guys. So in any case, what we're trying to do is minimally change and very site specifically, change that site so we can put our offices there and leave the rest of it the way it is. It will be a long time before the area will be sewered so that there even could be any other change to add the additional housing or whatever we showed in place, which sure, at some point it'll come. But the other side of the coin is the sewer has to go through me to get to this property anyway, because I own the property next door. And the sewer will go down, or I would logically think it's going to go up the draw that comes from the east, and which lets me to comment about the drainage plan and so forth. Drainage, there's a drainage way right through the middle of this property, right about the halfway point. And that drainage way goes to where just the other side of my property line on the east, there is used to be a pond, which over time eroded and went through. But at some point, when we redo the residential uses there, whenever that might be, that's when we should address the drainage, because it'll be a part of it. And if you know the property, it's obvious what the drainage is going to be, because it exists the way it is now. And so, anyway, that goes to the waiver or the request that we deal with that at a later point in time. I want to address the, quote, illegal subdivision. We took title to the ground the way the parcels were identified in the city and on the city's books. And they're identified as 2 parcels, not as 1 parcel. There was a city parcel and a county parcel, and that's how we took title. Then Steve, of course, was very nice to tell me that he thought there was an illegal subdivision because we used those 2 parcel definitions when we took title to the ground. So that was one of the predicate acts or reasons why we're coming forward today. We're going to cure that problem, right? And not have to worry about it because we're asking for the change of zone. So we've analyzed 84th Street from Old Cheney to Vine. I think there are 94 commercial uses. I'll get my number down here somewhere.
92.
on there.
Yeah. 92 commercial uses bordering 84th Street between Old Cheney and Vine Street. Off of 84th, and quite a number of those are office. Several in that list are church, but the list is fairly accurate for, I think we have it identified by office or by church or whatever the commercial use might be. I should have said when I got up that this is a situation of YIMBY, not NIMBY. Yes, in my backyard. It is my backyard, but the other thing that's interesting, we've got support from all of the neighbors to change this zone. I presented, in the presentation, there is a petition signed by the neighbors that, or the majority of the neighbors, approving of the change of zone. One of the neighbors who didn't sign the petition sent me an email saying she supported the project. And I think there's even a couple letters that are available too from neighbors that support the change of zone. The acquisitioner really came at the instigation of one of my neighbors so that we wouldn't. Nobody wants to put Stony Hill Road through. There's a couple things that are important regarding the waiver of the policy for access. One, putting in a turn lane cost, we estimate, today's price is about $275,000. This has an existing, we're not talking about getting a new access point. This property has access off 84th Street now. To go off Stony Hill has a culvert underneath it, and it leads into the drainage way and contributes to the drainage way that I was talking about earlier. And the culvert is probably a 3-foot diameter, 4 foot maybe. So the cost of putting Stony Hill in will be way disproportionate to just putting in a block of street. It's going to be $700,000 enterprise. So the reason for the waivers, not only is there not going to be much use there, but the cost of trying to abide doesn't justify the number of turns that are going to be required by that. And we did traffic studies, and I don't know whether the 2035 traffic study includes the East Bypass, but I can tell you that the traffic has dropped since the South Bypass off of 84th Street, since South Bypass went through. My neighbor, Ruthie Spethman, who sent a letter of support, commented just yesterday, it's not so bad off of 84th Street now because South Bypass takes the highway. Anyway, I'd answer any questions. The request we have for the change of zone is very site-specific, and the use of the property is going to be very site-specific. Use for the office and leaving the rest the way it is. And all the issues that come up with the residential and so forth, and the pipeline, they can be addressed when we move forward in 20 years or 15 or whenever the future residential use is looked at for the property. So I'd answer any questions you have about it.
Questions?
So just make sure I understand your last statement. When you move forward with the phase 2 or whatever phase you want to call that, that's when you would agree to put in the turn lane?
Actually, if you see where they want you to put the turn lane, it's really not compatible with the piece of ground that we're turning into the office use, because it takes it beyond. I think we have a
Yeah, zoom into that, would you
we have a
please?
picture of. Actually, we looked at the design of it. The other thing you have to understand about that location there is that it drops off 84th pretty severely as you move. The driveway, the existing driveway is relatively flat off of 84th, but it slopes to the north. And on the north side and the north side of the drainage way through there, there's a pretty good drop off of 84th Street. So if you did put the turn lane in, you not only have to build the turn lane, but you also have to build a road that comes back around, and it would take a ton of fill.
And it will what, Fred?
It'd take a ton of fill. It just doesn't make sense, but
So yeah,
Rick can
this
talk about
exhibit
that.
is what we put together to price out the turn lane. Understand too that this design does not meet access management policy because the turn lane would have to be longer, but that's as much as we can fit on the property.
And where is that easement? Is it a 10-foot easement, drainage easement, or how wide is that?
down the middle,
Yeah,
I don't
for
know.
the storm. Where those trees are. Okay. I think you can see it on there. 10 foot, yeah.
I think there might be culvert in there now,
Be
actually.
something
Huh?
where the floodplain is.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's storm sewer in there now.
Other questions?
Sure. Mr. Hoppy,
Yeah,
the existing access off of 84th, that's not a right-in, right-out. You can go,
oh, you can go both ways, yeah.
okay. And to make it a right-in, right-out?
It's
without
5 lanes there, Rich.
Okay.
There's a center.
There is a center turn lane.
Turn lane.
Uh-huh.
And as an example, a block down, or actually the other side of Brant, is Messiah Lutheran, which has a school, and they come and go off there. No right turn lane there. And it's got a center lane for crossing.
Dick, did you have a question?
Yeah, Fred, if you look at 84th Street now, since it's been upgraded, all the new buildings along Firethorn along 84th Street, they all come off of that main signaled intersection of Firethorn Lane and 84th.
The two new
Right.
offices there.
Right, plus the two right on the corner of Van Doren, UBS's new office, and I forget what the other one is, a medical or something.
Lincoln Fed.
Yeah, okay.
I agree.
They all come off of arterials and.
They
and-
come off of arterials,
Right, on
not
signals.
84th.
Right. And to get to those properties. And so I think the trend in the city has been to try to eliminate as many entrances or driveways and what's coming off of the major arterials.
We don't disagree. That's why we're asking for a deviation.
Well, my question though is, I understand the cost factor that you're getting into, but either coming off of Stony Hill Road and swinging it further west, to really address the residents or the hotel and your office building seems to be, you're saying it'd be about 700,000.
I'm guessing,
Okay.
Dick, but
And 250,000 on a right turn lane.
correct. That we priced.
Yeah. I just, for the long-term benefit of the city, I'm looking to find some way to make those as least expensive as possible, but to create the continued movement on 84th without potentially increasing accident situations.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern, but the use we're going to have there isn't that much.
Yeah.
I mean, and 84th Street handles tons of traffic as it is.
Yeah.
The amount of traffic that we're going to use, that change, is practically minimal. Most of us use 84th Street to get to our offices now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a question of turning. But we did a turn lane analysis between Old Cheney and Holdridge, which is 5 miles. Private residential driveways are 24, and ours is one of those 24. Private commercial driveways is 14. And then there are like St. Mark's, which is a daycare and a preschool, First Free, Messiah Lutheran and School, and portions of the State Farm Office Park.
Right.
None of those have turn lanes.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, the reality is, what we're asking to do and put in place is a drop of water in the bucket.
Does the
And
city
it's
bike
just-
trail,
Huh?
does the city bike trail right off of 84th, does that have a turn lane?
No, the bike trail, oh, you mean down at,
South of State
Down at-
Farm?
I don't believe it does.
I don't know.
Pretty sure it doesn't.
Okay.
We can look, but
Yeah.
there is a bike trail on 84th.
Right.
I mean, that section of 84th between A and Old Cheney is, it's like a 6-foot sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that trail's already there.
Well, my point being that the parking for the bike trail at right
Yeah.
south of the tracks, or what used to be the tracks, actually would generate far more in and outs
Oh, sure.
than what you're talking about.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, Messiah Lutheran,
Yeah,
coming and going from school,
yeah,
there's tons of turns, not just on Sunday.
right.
Yeah.
There were,
No, that's what
there are a couple of things addressed in the staff report I wanted you to speak to.
Yeah.
Number one, there was quite a bit of a discussion about the pipeline planning area.
right.
With what you have proposed, what are your, how does the pipeline planning area affect what you're trying to accomplish?
It does not affect it at all.
And
We're leaving the R1, essentially, we're creating 2 lots. One big outlot that can be developed in the future, and the 1 lot for commercial. And the commercial use can be within the pipeline,
Got it.
so no big deal.
And if it were all residential at some point in the future, I mean, if you were looking at that and trying to develop it as a comprehensive PUD
Right.
focused on residential.
Knock down the house. What you do if you're going to residentially develop that, probably, the max best use, and depending on how you deal with Stony Hill and its cost, because that's how you get access. And depending on whether or not you're going to get the church to sell you you'd have to coordinate the whole
Sure.
thing. So essentially, future, you got to recognize I own the property next door, which is 9 acres, so,
Which one, Fred?
huh?
Which one?
Which
Oh,
property?
you're residential?
Yeah, my own.
Yeah, okay.
Right. You've been there, haven't you?
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah. That, you coordinate that whole thing, but you'd probably be putting in something along the drainage way and then taking housing off both sides of it, probably in like row homes.
Yep.
That's what our forte is. But
Right.
you probably would not leave the house the way it is.
Right. And then my second question was, there's been discussion about the hotel versus short-term rental and what that looks like.
Yeah, let me talk about that.
Yes, please.
The hotel, the proposal we've got in front of you is specific to create a headquarters office for us. The reason the hotel use is there, so we don't have to remodel, we don't have to structurally change the house to use it. If it was just office, we'd have to go in and reinforce all the floors, double the studs, or the joists, and create a remodeling process that's crazy. If it's designated as a hotel, we can leave it the way it is. We don't have that worry. And the plan is to use it as our congregation space and the break room and those kinds of uses of the adjacent office. So we'll have meetings there and set it up as meeting room.
So you're not planning on running a bed and breakfast?
No vacancy.
Appreciate the clarification on that.
No, seriously, I mean, the reason we're doing it that way, and the designation, I mean, up to 5 homes, I could not get my wife to make one of those beds.
Got it.
Any other questions for, yes, Rich?
Yeah, Fred, when I modified what was Bike Peddlers at 33rd and B, and maybe this is a question best left for LTU, but they came in and said, yeah, sure, you can do this. We had to reinforce the buildings and put in bulletproof windows and things, but they also said that we had to have a 36 radius turn in from 33rd Street instead of just what was the residential driveway. We had to really, so people didn't have to slow down or stop on 33rd Street to get into our property. And I'm not sure if you are allowed to keep this access off of 84th Street, whether that complies with a turning radius that might be.
I can't answer that question.
Well,
When we build it, we'll, if we need to widen it a little bit.
and there's room in there to do that.
What we currently have shown is radiuses per a standard commercial drive.
It's
I believe they're 25 foot.
25-foot radius.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
We'd appreciate your support.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, at this time, we will take testimony in support of the application. Any testimony in support? Is there any neutral testimony? Any testimony in opposition? Additional questions for staff? Rich, do you want to ask your question of the staff?
Sure. Looks like George is going to take it.
Oh, did you have a question for LTU specifically?
Just about the turning radius. If the waiver was granted, and they were allowed to keep the access off of 84th Street what the turning radius or the width of the two maybe help soften the people having to stop before they turn.
Sure, Bob could address that question and maybe touch on the culvert discussion as well.
Residential driveways taper 5 feet coming in. Commercial driveways have a 25-foot radius, so that would be a requirement if a commercial driveway was there.
Thank you.
Did you want to talk about the culvert?
I guess a couple things on the expenses for the turn lane in the street. The turn lane, designed to meet the most stringent standards, probably does reach that expense he's talking about. However, there are options that they could request to minimize the amount of stacking, the taper length, and that, which could diminish some of that expense. I would agree that no matter what, it would be a significant expenditure. The crossing of the drainage way on Stony Hill with a 3 to 4 foot culvert, those would be typically precast culvert sections that are not terribly expensive, wouldn't be running in the $700,000 range at all,
Okay.
if indeed that is the size that is required.
I assumed that that was paving the street too.
It still sounds quite high.
Yeah, okay.
So George, I have a question about the PUD overlay in this R1 area. But for the access challenges, and I'm not trying to diminish what those are, but let's say those aren't there. You could have the PUD overlay that could include this small portion of commercial as part of it. Is that correct?
If there was a way to avoid violating the access management policy or violating the comprehensive plan as far as having commercial access through residential, yes. But in this case, there's no way to do that.
There's no way to do that. Yep,
Um,
understood. Okay.
And I would add, respective of the PUD request, it's understood as far as what they're requesting now. But keep in mind, the lot 1 of the PUD is nearly 2 acres. And so there's nothing that says that either the current applicant or a future owner or applicant could come back and request a doubling or triple amount for square footage beyond what is requested today.
Additional questions for staff?
George, or for both of you, is there any other solution than Stony Hill, or either leaving that as the entrance, I mean, making it a commercial entrance or a turn lane? Those three options?
I think generally what the staff report is suggesting is that there is a development potential here, but it's not for commercial. It's residential. There could be, as one example, an assisted living facility could be one potential. The house could be retained up front. It's outside the pipeline planning area. There can be connectivity from that existing house and whatever else is developed to the east, instead of having commercial with proposed access off 84th Street.
I believe their future proposed residential would abut Stony Hill, would it not?
Correct. Their comprehensive, or their PUD shows that, but it does not show the Lot 1 commercial extending into that residential area.
Right. So that they would really be separated, though, is what I'm saying. You have a driveway off of 84th for the commercial, and then an extension of Stony Hill for the residential.
True. You would address the one issue of the comprehensive plan as far as the not having traffic, commercial traffic through the residential, but it would not address the access management issue.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm going back 40 years again in my memory, but when I developed the two houses, which became bike peddlers, one, I had to adhere to much more stringent guidelines and building permits and everything, because it was a retail location. Next door, we just worked on bikes, and they told me that someone can cut hair, put a beauty salon in their own house, and not have to convert to commercial. And I said, well, I'm not going to sell anything out of the second house. And so we were allowed to not have to maintain the same, not change it commercial. It was already zoned commercial, but we didn't have to put in the windows and the extra fireproof drywall and things like that. What delineates a property? I mean, could Hoppy have some offices and not be commercial if they're not selling product?
There is the option for home occupation. The owner would have to live there, and no more than 20% of the square footage of the house could be devoted towards that home occupation. But you could have a home occupation use, just not a commercial use.
Just to add to that, you also can't have any outside employees who don't live there. So you can't go move into the house and have 30 employees coming and going. You can only have the employees who live there. So the circumstance here is pretty clear. It can be redeveloped as a residential use just like all the other houses up and down 84th Street or any other arterial street. That's why we're recommending denial, is there's no way to develop it commercially and without having the access on 84th Street and violating the safety standards of the city for an arterial street. But the house can be used for short-term rental and can be used for residential use as part of a redevelopment of the site. But a home occupation, he's being upfront, he wants to have 30 employees coming and going, that wouldn't work as a home occupation.
Other questions for staff?
I'm going to piggyback on that for just a second. So instead of doing I don't know how to, would RT be more appropriate? I'm trying to think outside the box here a little bit. But what I think I understand Steve saying is there's really no other zoning designation that would work for this office space.
Right. One of the tenets or requirements of RT zoning, residential transition zoning, is that it abuts an existing commercial zone, which there's no existing nearby commercial. And I would mention, and the staff report did touch on this, that we had multiple inquiries prior to the current applicant on this property, and they were geared towards residential, and I think it was the sewer issue being roughly 2,000 feet away that discouraged them. But residential, assisted living, there are other options that would work aside from commercial.
But no residential can happen in the pipeline planning area, correct?
It's a non-regulatory criteria. We try to work with developers to develop a residential project where they have other aspects of the residential development, like garages, outlots, parking, etc., as opposed to dwellings, which are more sensitive to place in those areas.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant rebuttal?
We recognize there are other ways you can use the property. We're here because we want to put a headquarters office on that property. And there's tons of offices up and down 84th Street. There's tons of commercial up and down 84th Street. The size of what we've done is site-specific. We have no intent, nor could we build another office, as was suggested on the site, without coming back and getting an amendment to the PUD, which could be denied at the time for the obvious reason that it would be too much. And so just simply, we'd like to put an office there. It's an appropriate use for the place. All the neighbors are okay with it. And so we ask for a change of zone and allow the use. And I can tell you, it's not going to be heavily used. I mean, just not a high-density use we're asking for, which should mitigate any question about the access.
I'd like to add some color from just the design perspective. I don't know if we can get the screen shared again. We really intend for this to be a more residential scale design. Fred has mentioned previously, the visual impact would be minimal. You can see highlighted here what that would look like from the 84th Street direction. And then these are some concept imagery that kind of preliminarily describes our intent for the design. We're very committed to the gable ends referenced in the existing house design, but also very familiar as a residential form. And so kind of this, I guess, typology of design is one of the ways in which we're trying to make this more compatible.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would move to close the public hearing.
Second, Core.
Shelley?
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
I would move to approve change of zone 23013.
I think we have to
as-
do Dick, I think we have to do the comprehensive plan amendment first.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Or the 23002 4.1A.
Thank you. I flipping down, I was looking at the whole thing. With the conditions of the motion to amend.
So you are moving to approve the amendment contrary to the staff report?
Correct,
Okay, with the conditions as approved. Okay?
correct.
I don't know that we're saying that quite correctly.
Steve Hendrickson. So the first item is the comprehensive plan amendment. The conditions that were offered by the applicant are coming up on the changes zone. So on the comprehensive plan amendment, it's pretty straightforward. It's a change from urban residential to commercial on 2 acres.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it would be comprehensive plan amendment 23002. And I would move approval on that.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Joy.
Okay. Discussion, and let's go
Gonna
ahead and
discuss
discuss
all
all
three?
three together. Okay.
I initially, when I went through all of this, and I know the area, I know where Fred lives, and that whole area in there. I've worked with many of the clients that have supported this. I was concerned about the access to 84th Street. I got to really analyzing, as they were presenting here today, the accesses that exist today. And there are significant accesses that already exist, as this one does, from really Vine Street or even further north on down, and both residential and businesses along there. With this one already existing, I don't see why it can't still stay in place and be converted over to a wider width, which makes turning easier and quicker. And knowing their business, he is correct. They don't have many people in an office. It's very limited, and their people are out in the field. So I don't see that there's going to be any huge increase of traffic for this site, even with the quote-unquote hotel designation on the house. And so I've kind of done a 180 on where I started, because knowing the business, knowing the reputation they have for their other projects, low-income housing projects that we've been through already and stuff, and the fact that I now have a better understanding of what the house and the building, office building, would be used for. I know there's not going to be heavy traffic going in and out of there. So consequently, I think approving, when we get to it, approving with the amendments they've suggested will not greatly impact this property for any time in the long distance future, other than what with that driveway, what it is today. So I also am pleased to see their note at the bottom to address some of those concerns about no early child care facilities, residential health facilities, both non-residential and residential schools, and so on, are permitted in the pipeline area. That really keeps that front of that property reading just the way it is right now today. So I will be supporting this.
Other discussion?
Part of our charge as commissioners is to think long-term into the future. So not only this particular project, but after this project is done, or what happens after this particular owner doesn't own it anymore. And for that reason, I'm not going to support any of these three, because I think that it opens the door to have commercial in there. And while the neighbors may be supportive of this particular owner and this particular purpose, once we have commercial in there, it can then be commercial for any number of things. And I'm not sure that the neighbors, number one, understand that, and number two, would be supportive if it was different commercial in there. And so that makes me very hesitant. It also, there's two big glaring issues at us. The comp plan does not support this. And we have access management issues that we are trying to clean up throughout the city. And so as redevelopment happens, that this is how we fix it. I think this is spot zoning, putting commercial and residential, and I don't think that that's appropriate at this location. Most of the other commercial zonings along 84th are going to be at major intersections where they have two streets, and this isn't a major intersection, and it's appropriate to stay residential.
Other discussion?
I didn't take a huge issue to it being commercial, but I think you can't ignore the access management. If you want it commercial, then you have to build it commercial, and that means putting in the turning lane any which way around it. This one, most of the residential on that either backs up to 84th or pretty much faces a interior neighborhood, where this one does face 84th Street more. I think you do open a can of worms, but the neighbors did support it. And how many times do we go against what neighbors want? Anyways, so the commercial zoning I did not take issue with and would be likely to support it, but I can't ignore the access management. That if they want to put commercial in there, they're going to have to put a turning lane, in my opinion.
Well, and we've, just to piggyback on what Gloria has said, it's been determined that this body does not have the authority to overrule LTU with regard to their access management decision, that has to go straight to the city council. And I'm coming back to my original issue, but without the city council weighing in on that, I do not feel like I can look at the other aspects of this, because I don't know what their decision would be. If I had that decision, I might be inclined to look at this project a little differently. But knowing that we are not the decision makers with regard, or even the recommendators, that's not a word, with regard to access management, I feel like I need to know what the city council is going to decide on that before I can look at the rest of the project. And as a result, I will be voting no as well. Anyone else want to comment before we call the vote?
I'm a little bit with Dick on this, in the sense of it does fulfill some of the infill concepts that we push for all the time. And in order to do work in this area, because of the pipeline, now we've pushed it so only certain aspects can happen in there. So the challenge for me isn't being able to have this be commercial because of the issues along 84th where we have done spot zoning modifying that. It's the challenge of how do we handle that LTU access management. So I'm a little split on all of it without understanding and giving direction to City Council of what our recommendation is. But I do understand the challenges as we start to do infill projects on pipeline areas, that now we've limited people's ability to do infill when we want to make sure they use the existing sewer before we go down that path of being 2,000 feet away, or some of those, if I'm quoting the right dimensions. So it makes it really challenging to do the residential at this time, but I see that that's something that can happen with these developments as we move forward. But if we want to continue to use the existing services in place, the existing roads in place, all of those types of things, I'll be in support on some of it, and I still have to wrestle with that idea on LTU, because I'm very supportive of what we try to do in our city, and we've done a great job so far.
It is a bit of a conundrum. I agree, because there are some great aspects to what's being proposed here, and certainly the neighborhood itself is in agreement with it, and that's very important and goes a long way. But it is with regard to this particular project. I also have some general concerns about going against the access management policy that has been, as we said, put in place to mitigate chaos, and going forward with a case-by-case review of everything that would be a change from the access management policy opens us up to a lot of challenges with future applications as well. And so I think that kind of has to be considered. Yeah.
I'm very much in support of the access policy that's in place. My point being that this building already exists, the driveway already exists, and we're not adding a driveway along there. And that's where I break, that's my line that I break at. If something's already existing and it's not going to be a heavier use than potentially what it is right now, then I have a problem with not keeping that access.
Sure.
But if something new were to come forward that's on bare ground, something like that, I absolutely agree with not allowing access to the major arterials.
That's a good point.
So it's really just a matter of what is this proposal and how would it affect traffic in the future? And I don't see a major impact of traffic with this proposal.
And we're not really setting precedent here. It's a parcel by parcel decision that we and inevitably the city council will address. I wish we did have that traffic report, but the fact remains is that there are dozens of much more highly used properties and churches and that are not having to put in a turn lane with much higher traffic.
The point that they made earlier was that 3 years from now, it very well would, could have been something that would be required for future development. So that's pretty close.
3 years from now, but not now.
True. That'll be here before we know it, right? Any other discussion?
I just keep thinking that property was on the market for a long time. And I kept wondering what happens if that house just sits there and falls down or is just not used at all. And then what?
Yeah.
And other uses that could be used for the property could potentially have more traffic. An assisted living facility, which we dealt with recently in residential area where you have staff coming and going on 3 shifts, there's additional traffic.
I also agree that the timing with the city council decision makes this difficult. I mean, we do have existing policies, access management, traffic safety, those things are in place, but this is in a weird kind of nebulous space for me. I think this is a very challenging, but I appreciate the idea of being able to keep that house and have it be well maintained and
I do as well.
use the traffic and use the property, and as opposed to having it just sit vacant.
Yep. Thanks, Cindy. Okay, I think we're ready to call the vote. Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
No.
Cruz.
No.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
No.
Motion carried 5-3.
I would move to approve change of zone 23013.
Let's do the annexation next.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, I guess they're out of order, aren't they? Yeah,
Go ahead
you're
with
right.
change of
I'm
zone.
sorry. They're out of order on my sheet. Change of zone 23013. With the conditions,
With the amendments from the developer.
is there a second?
Second, Joy.
Any other discussion, or can we call the vote? Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
No.
Cruz.
No.
Edens.
No.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
No.
Motion failed 4-4.
And these are recommendations to the city council, right? So if
Right, so
there's
there is no
not-
recommendation.
There is no, we just
This would
are
be
not
met-
making
This would be held
recommendations.
over to the next planning commission hearing and for a vote only on the change of zone item.
And I would move to approve annexation 23001.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
No.
Cruz.
No.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
No.
Motion carried 5-3.
So the only thing that'll come back to us is the change of zone. Okay?
With the amendment.
With the amendment.
Okay, next item is item 5.1, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 23003, to review as to conformance with the 2050 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed amendment to the Van Dorn redevelopment plan to make updates throughout the document, including amending the redevelopment area boundary, generally bounded by Hill Street on the north, 13th Street on the east, Lowell Street on the south, and 7th Street on the west, also including the pedestrian crossing and Van Dorn Park Enhancement Project, with a project area that includes Van Dorn Park, public right-of-way along 9th, 10th, High, and Van Dorn Streets, as well as the parcel located at 2744 South 9th Street on property generally located at 10th and Van Dorn Streets. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
No.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. I'm Hallie Salem, Urban Development Department, 555 South 10th Street, Suite 205. Before you today is amended Van Dorn redevelopment plan with the addition of the Van Dorn redevelopment area number 2 and the pedestrian crossing and Van Dorn Park redevelopment project. Urban Development is requesting Planning Commission today find the update and project amendment to the Van Dorn redevelopment plan consistent with the 2050 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan. And just a reminder where we are in this process. On November 16th, 2022, Planning Commission agreed with staff recommendation and voted 6-0, finding of blighted and substandard conditions for the Van Dorn redevelopment area. And this is where we were then, this complete blight study. Blight study goes to Planning Commission. And then the City Council held a public hearing on December 19th and voted 7-0 to find the area blighted and substandard. So here we are now at the redevelopment plan. And then this is the area that we are adding to that redevelopment plan. The plan includes approximately 102 acres and includes Van Dorn Park, adjacent street rights-of-way, several neighboring privately owned properties. The plan is an update to the Van Dorn redevelopment plan originally approved in 2008 and declared blighted in 2007. And included with the plan is the pedestrian crossing and Van Dorn redevelopment project. And that project, and I will show you that map. So this is the black outlined area is the redevelopment plan area for Van Dorn, and then the red is the pedestrian crossing and Van Dorn Park enhancement project. And staff report recommends approval. The redevelopment plan utilizes policy statements from the comprehensive plan as guiding principles for the redevelopment in the area. The pedestrian crossing and Van Dorn Park redevelopment project is consistent with the comprehensive plan because it improves access to a community park, which is an essential element of a complete neighborhood, enhances pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and supports healthy and active lifestyles for Lincoln residents.
Can you put that button back up?
Sure.
And a question for you on it. Is the red on the right of 10th Street, is that a pedestrian access going across also?
Yes, so thank you for pointing that out. The red area, there's a commercial property here, and then 3 residential properties, and then another commercial property. And those 3, none of the 3 residential properties have sidewalk south of those residents. And so that is in part why that was included within the redevelopment project area, so that we could improve pedestrian and bicycle access along that frontage, and then as well as crossing 10th Street.
Are all of these overhead crossings?
They're intended right now to be at grade crossings.
Okay.
The budget isn't there for overhead crossings, and I think there's also challenges with having bridges or other above grade crossings.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then I would just mention that some minor changes were made to bring the current plan up to standards, and so you'll that there are some minor changes throughout the plan. So we're providing a substitute plan because of these new maps, and that include the amended area. And then also we needed to clarify the deed restrictions in Van Dorn Park. I think there was a minor error included last time, so we needed to address that. There was also some challenges recognized with the preservation of Robbers Cave that I think need to be addressed. And then general expectations we wanted to emphasize for safe access to Van Dorn Park and preservation of the park facilities. So we met a number of times with the neighborhood, South Salt Creek neighborhood. Staff met with them 2 times. We met with Indian Village Neighborhood Association multiple times. And Indian Village, or excuse me, Irvingdale neighborhood representatives did attend some of those meetings, so we did have some conversations with them as well. The redevelopment plan amendment was also discussed at the Parks Master Plan open house for Van Doren Park, and as a potential funding source for the park itself. We have received ongoing communications with Indian Village neighborhood and South Salt Creek neighborhood, and even up to today from Indian Village. So we just want to make sure that we are addressing their concerns. I think there are just general concerns about the park itself, wanting to preserve it as a neighborhood park, and we recognize that, and want to make sure that this is a living document that addresses ongoing concerns, that will make some small amendments to what we already provided you, to add the pollinator garden and natural surface trail that's already in the park, and then also clarify that we desire to update some of the park facilities like the parking lots to make them safer, better lighting, better activation around the park. And then we did talk about funding up to 25 years. We will have to make some changes to the extremely blighted area if we did want to add that up to 20 years. So we need to make sure that if we are intending to use the 20-year TIF, that some additional area would need to be designated as extremely blighted.
To clarify, 15 years.
Did I say
not
15?
25?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I thought I heard a noise. I should pay attention when I hear a noise. So I'm sorry, that authorized for 15 years. And if we wanted to extend that to 20 years, some additional area would need to be designated extremely blighted. Next steps, we will go to City Council with this plan amendment in April, and then we will hold additional meetings with the neighborhoods, Lincoln Transportation and Utilities, Parks, Planning, to develop this crossing over Nebraska Parkway, and then do some follow-up as well with Parks on the Van Doren Park Master Plan. Any questions?
Questions for Hallie? Yeah. Okay.
Those pedestrian crossings on 10th and Van Doren, will they be signaled for pedestrians to cross?
I think that's an excellent question. We have heard from the neighborhood. There is a strong desire for signalized crossings. Yeah. And I would like to listen to the neighborhood on that. So, full disclosure, I'm also an Indian Village board member, so.
Awesome.
So I would like to listen to my constituents on that, and I think we just need to continue discussions with LTU and Parks and Planning on those.
And the second question is, I think I heard you say that the bike, what do you want to call it, the proper term, the racing bike trail stays.
Natural surface trail or the oh my gosh.
Motocross.
Yeah. Mountain bike, thank you. Mountain bike trail. I was corrected. I've been saying mountain bike trail, but then I was corrected to say natural surface trail because people can use it, walk on it, other modes of transportation can use it. So I was corrected. But yes, that is something we have heard, that there's great interest in maintaining that. I know it was intended initially to be a temporary installation, but we've seen such great use of it, not only for bicycles, but for pedestrians as well, and offers an alternate to a hard surface trail.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions for Hallie? Thank you very much. So that was the staff presentation. I assume you were the applicant as well?
Yes.
Is there any testimony in support of this application?
Hello, my name is Diane Volkowiak, that's Walkowiak, and I'm at 1600 Sioux, that's Sioux. Get all that spelling correct.
All right.
I am representing Indian Village Neighborhood Association, and we definitely support this revised redevelopment plan and the things it includes, expanding the area that's included in the plan, improving infrastructure, because we really do need some things like sidewalks around there, and a lot of the infrastructure is old. Making continued enhancements to the park, most importantly, getting a safe, at-grade, signalized crossing around, we're looking at 10th and High. The Indian Village Neighborhood Association, when it was created, one of the driving goals was to get a safe crossing over Highway 2. That was in 1994. Do the math. It's about time. The South Beltway's done. It's now Nebraska Parkway. It is time that we do this so that people can get across to the park. It also provides a connection for the Busalas Trail, and it comes within blocks, and the Bison Trail, which has a trailhead in Van Dorn Park. So we're excited about that, and it's in the city bike plan to have a crossing there as well. So that's a very important component, getting that crossing. Dick, you had some questions about Van Dorn Park and enhancements. The mountain bike trail is one of the recent enhancements. It's a 1.5-mile track. We've also got some new playground equipment, which we would like to see expanded. We have pollinator gardens. The bike trail has been fantastic. Van Dorn Park was largely ignored for about 20 years. The last 3 years, if you haven't been over there, you need to get over there because it has been changing, and the bicycle track has drawn in so many new visitors. It's fantastic. And in fact, it's so popular that it spurred a citywide master plan for mountain bike trails. And it is one of the priority spots for the Southwest Quadrant. And so we're very much in favor of keeping that trail there. We're very much in favor of getting a safe crossing and improving things in that whole area, including the corridor, because we really would like to improve our neighborhood. Anybody have any questions?
Questions?
I just want to thank you for your advocacy for the park and all the efforts that the neighborhood has done. And it's really been exciting to watch the changes and the enhancements. I remember going to a potluck there probably almost 30 years ago, and for the longest time I'm like, nothing has changed. And just boom. I mean, anyway, I just wanted to thank you for your advocacy and your efforts in developing it. It's been really exciting to watch.
You're welcome. We've had a lot of citizen input, and it's led by a lot of volunteers who put in a lot of hours and money.
Thank you. Additional testimony and support.
My name is Jerry Cotter, C-O-T-T-E-R, and I live at 2111 Sewell Street, which is in the Irvingdale area, and I'm representing the Irvingdale Neighborhood Association. So I will be very brief because Diane covered the points that I wanted to make. I will say that we would prefer the overhead crossing, but if we get a signaled flat crossing, we will be delighted because our biggest concern is for our children. We are on the I have no sense of direction, east side of Nebraska Parkway, and our kids would love to go over and use the bike trails, but parents are reluctant to let them cross on their own, and parents are not always available to go with. So I would like to go on record as being in support of the Van Dorn redevelopment plan. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Additional testimony and support.
Although they're the leaders. I'm Rosina. I'm Rosina, 1850 Dakota Street. Am I supposed to spell my name? Thank you. I echo what these gals say, and I don't want to repeat. But to give you an idea of what goes on in Van Dorn Park, And to address your question about the crossing, we've had 2 children hit and 1 adult killed at that crossing. It's all within, they'll know the exact date. I think one of them was 2003. The other 2 were very recent. Part of that is, as you said, it was a hole. I would ride my bike through there and literally pick up syringes. Today, we have pollinator gardens, and we've spent over 700 hours for this, thank you for the correction, surface. It is a multi-purpose surface. There are people that walk there during their lunch breaks. There are people who walk their dogs on that trail. But the volunteer hours that went in there, and then the programming that goes on in that park are huge. The problem is parents drive their kids across the street, 9th Street, to bring their kid to the park because they just can't trust, even supervised, a gaggle of kids going across. I use that park regularly, and I will tell you, kids do. They come from Saratoga School. They come from Merle Beatty School, and I'll see them 3 or 4 at a time making the race through the intersection, and I'm like, oh, please, right? So it is an issue. A lot of it is you're coming up a hill. You're probably going a little faster, right? I'm not used to you sitting there. But anyhow, Devo has a program there. We put kids on bicycles. We bring the bicycles to the event because a lot of kids don't have bicycles. We do a sliding fee scale so that kids can take part in this summer event and hone in their skills. We do one at Wilderness Park. We do one at Van Dorn. I think this is the 5th year. I am on that board. Then we have NICA. That is interscholastic high school students that are riding bicycles. And yes, para-bicycles. And they're learning to race them, but they're learning to hone in on their skills, and it is that sense of community. They do pick up trash days. We do trail maintenance days. We now have church groups coming in and wanting to do trail maintenance days. I get to organize that because I'm also one of the trail leaders of the trail. So Thor, Trails Have Our Respect, is an organization you're going to hear about a lot. We're putting together the multi-use, I hope, plan for parks, which would include mountain bikes, skateboards, people, dogs, outdoor learning centers, and really encompass them in a park. But with this specific project, man, you've got the buy-in. This is a project, you've got the buy-in, but we need a signal. We need a light so that everybody's safe. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Additional testimony and support. Is there any neutral testimony or testimony in opposition? Any testimony in opposition? Additional staff questions? Do you have anything you'd like to add at this time, Hallie?
I would just like to add that with the South Beltway, as Diane said, now is the time to get this project adopted and move forward with this crossing. It's been 30 years, dare I say, since we wanted to see this crossing happen, so now is the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I would move that we close the public hearings.
Second. Oh, go ahead, Cor.
Joy.
Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Orr.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
And I would move that we find the Van Doren amended redevelopment plan in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and it is conformance 23003.
Second, Ryman Yost.
Discussion.
I think this is just a continuing basis of of upgrading this park and the area. And now that we've got less truck traffic moving through that area, it's a perfect time to get this moving.
I agree. Van Dorn Park was sort of a little island, especially when they put in that big sweeping turn lane for the trucks and took out a lot of trees. But it's revitalized thanks a lot to the neighborhoods and the volunteers and the city who have made it a place to go again and a well-needed park. I would caution that I like multi-use trail or natural trail because people are using more than mountain bikes. They're walking their dogs, they're using BMX, gravel bikes, there are a wide variety of bicycles, and that might pigeonhole it a little bit too much. But no, I'm very much in favor of this.
I agree. It's an exciting project. I'm excited that it's moving forward and appreciate the community support as well as the city. Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so.
Christina. Leolini. 1850 Dakota. I'm glad to see you all here. I just wanted to kind of ask a question, but also a comment about 27th and Star, that development that we heard about a couple of weeks ago. And I really appreciated your comment about the climate action, though, as I understand it, doesn't fit because we only look at land use. I'm learning a lot. I've been a little off, haven't been in tune with this, but I'm learning a lot. So my question being, especially with 27th and Star, I heard mixed feelings about whether 2 units towards affordable housing was a good thing. And I really have been studying Plan Forward. And I understand that it's the interpretation of what is a good thing. But I think the challenge might be to ask the developers, what is your profit ratio? And what are you willing to give back to your community? I see projects like even though Christy and I have kind of butted heads about 48th and Madison, the reality is there's more affordable housing in that than 2 units that some people were really happy about at 27th and Star, where we really need it. So I'm not sure how it is I, as a citizen, can be of use. Because hammering on the city council, I am not used to you being there. Hammering on the city council doesn't do any good, right? And you all are very limited in what you can do. And you and I and others have worked the other side of this. So how do we get the equitability? How do we get the inclusivity? How do we get a price point that is reality? Like on my $40,000 a year but I get alimony, I could probably do $700 a month. I'm lucky to own my own house. That was part of my, right? I'm so thankful. But I think about the taxes, I think about the insurance. What is an equitable price point? And not that any of us right now can solve that, but I'd really like to encourage that discussion. What is your profit margin? What are you willing to give back to the community? And shout it out, right? Like, don't put Hausman or whoever, that's one I see lately, on the side. Say, we're a part of the community and we put 5 units of housing that was affordable, or, you know, and forgive me, but I'm starting to learn how to use this now. This, which was one of the worst land uses I think I've ever seen, because we can't replace that cap at First and Pioneer, and they just ground it down. And is that equitable land use? Is it inclusive? Who did it benefit? Who did it benefit? Had it been done on a scale of leaving the sandstone cropping? They did move that red rock, by the way. Parks and Recs paid for it to go across the street. But had they left that, because there's no affordable housing there, right? It's 2 bedrooms at $1,800 a month. So there's no affordable housing, but you could have had pretty high dollar housing, made the same amount overall, maintained the vista and structure of the property. But can we think that long-sighted, I think you said, that long-term? Can we think about the impact even in 3 years or the next flood cycle? That, just the developing, because I go out there, I run out there, will have on our constituents. And those are my questions. I've been asking the wrong question, right? Or I think I am. But if we can have further dialogue about that, I think that we could have a more equitable solution. Oh, Christy, not $26,000 in Epco Park, 38 to 42. I had old numbers on the University Place area. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Don't forget your phone.
I will.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.